To begin your long tail cast on, you have to start by putting a knot onto your needle. I like to do this with a slip knot. And the easiest way to make a slip knot is to pick up, this is the ball end of my yarn, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to loop it over the tail. So I've made this loop. I'm going to reach through that loop and grab the ball end of yarn and tighten. And as you can see, it ties a knot around the yarn itself. And the slip knot, when tied properly, tightens by pulling on the ball end, not the tail end. The tail end loosens it up. And you want to put that onto your knitting needle and pull the ball end. And you don't want to make this super snug, otherwise you're going to have a miserable time working the second row. The tail of your cast on, see my cut end, goes over your thumb. And I tell people you can remember this because tail and thumb both begin with a T. So you want your tail over your thumb, and then can you see how it makes, here, let me put this over here. See how it makes kind of a tent shape? Have you ever gone camping? I don't know about you, but every time I go camping, I'm usually in a two-man tent, and most of my camping experiences were from scouting, and inevitably, I always had a squabble with my tent mate. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's the nature of camping, I don't know. But I tell people that this tent is a two-man tent, and your thumb and your finger go in the tent together, like this, but they don't like each other, and they have to stay on their own side of the tent. Now you want to put your finger on top of this loop, and that's important because if you don't, and you pull up like this, you can shoot it right off your needle, and that's annoying. So put your finger right on top of that loop, and we're going to turn our hands so that it's pointing up. My finger and my thumb are now pointing at the ceiling, and it gives me this V shape, or we call them rabbit ears. You want to take your needle tip and trace your thumb. So from the palm of your hand up through the loop of your thumb, just like that, on top of the frontmost yarn on your finger and back down along your thumb. Drop just your thumb out of the loop. See the tent? Put the thumb back in the tent, and remember, they don't like each other, so they go to the opposite sides. Reset. I've got my bunny ears up along my thumb, on top of the yarn on my finger, back down through the loop on my thumb, drop your thumb out, put him back in the tent, and send him to his own side. Repeat this as often as you need to. One of the things that makes this cast on so nice is that it's making the loop with your thumb and knitting the row by pulling the yarn over from your finger up through that loop. It is casting on and knitting the first row. When my pattern says row 1 right side, I generally skip that row. If it's a pattern setup row that is incredibly crucial, I will then decide if I need to start with a wrong side row in the pattern, or if I need to purl back and then start my pattern, whatever you want to do. But if you, let me zoom in and you can see what I mean. Haha. This side has these lovely little scroll-like loops. The other side has purl bumps. Can you see them? Right there, purl bumps. If you were to pick this up, having cast on your stitches, and begin knitting, and treat this as a right side, you will have a ridge of garter stitch along the bottom of your work. If you want that, that's fine. But if you don't want it, then you need to adjust accordingly. Most often, I skip row 1 if it says right side and begin with row 2. The beautiful part about being the knitter is that you have control. The next thing you need to consider with your long tail cast on, and where most people have problems with it because they'll say to me, my long tail cast on is too tight, or my long tail cast on doesn't stretch. I get that one a lot. Can you see down here, since I'm all scooped in, can you see how loose that is at the base of my stitch? This is bamboo yarn. It would be really easy to make it super tight. When you go through your thumb and you pull that loop back through, see how it's making a loop around the base of the yarn that came around my knitting needle? If you pull this super tight, right here, right now, super tight, you will remove all the stretch. So I tell people that the part that is going over your thumb is very much like the spring in one of those ink pens that you can retract by pressing the button and it pops back down into the barrel of the pen. If you take one of those apart, and I was a naughty child, so I did that a lot. If you take one apart, you'll find inside a tiny spring. If you pull on either end of that tiny spring, you will have curly wire. Forevermore, it will just be curly wire. You will never get it back into a spring-like form. With your cast on, if you pull it snug, and now I'm going to pull some snug so you can really see the difference. If you pull it snug by putting your thumb in here, and then here's where people go wrong. They yank. They put this in here and they yank. And it creates a really tidy, beautiful looking edge. Really nice. With absolutely zero elasticity. None whatsoever. So if you look over here, these are the ones I cast on previously. See how they move on the needle? Nice and stretchy. These are the ones I yanked. Look at the difference. Look at the difference. Watch when I try to pull those apart. There's no stretch whatsoever. So if I were to squish them all together on the needles, you can see where I yanked and where I didn't. So the solution to that is stop yanking on it. Just stop yanking. Create the stitch, guide the thumb loop down snug against the base of the stitch, but not tight. You're not tying a knot. You're just looping it around the base of the stitch. It does take practice, but it is so worth doing. So worth it. See how tight and close those stitches are together and how these spread out nicely and they have stretch to them, even in bamboo, which people consider to be a non-stretchy fabric. A long tail cast on done correctly will have stretch.